as a boyfriend, girlfriend, doctor, caretaker, friend. So,
Mhm.
whatever it is, any area of your life, you have to learn how to be a pro in something, right? We all have natural gifts, but our greatest weakness in our charts are really our greatest strengths, as crazy
Mhm.
as that sounds.
No, it's
So it's
true.
funny in astrology, in Vedic astrology, you could have Nichbanga, which means that, there's a cancellation for the negativity. That means, when you have an exalted planet, that means something comes to you easy. But if something comes to you easy, you're super lazy about it.
Hmm. Hmm.
You're not putting so much effort, you're not utilizing the gift necessarily, right?
Totally.
If something's challenging, you're utilizing that gift, you're working harder on it.
Hello, and welcome to the Soul Awakening Podcast. I'm your host, Kat Fowler, and today's episode, I love this conversation. I feel like I say that every week, but I truly, truly mean what I say. I love this conversation. We're going to be talking all about Vedic astrology with my friend Lissabeta. She's an amazing Vedic astrologer, a psychic medium, and so much more. So I'm going to read her bio to you so you have an idea of what she does. And then this conversation really went deep, not just about Vedic astrology, but about like life patterns, karma, fate, contracts that we have with people, how to deal with certain things in our life involving the karma that is related to us in our chart. And it was just such an amazing conversation that hopefully you will get a lot out of. So I'm going to read her bio now. So Lissabeta Kalag is an intuitive coach, Vedic astrologer, psychic medium, and tarot reader, professionally guiding souls since 2011. Known for her uncanny accuracy, transformative insight, and spiritual depth, Lizabetta is a force in the world of intuitive healing and energetic alignment. With a superpower for making jaw-droppingly accurate predictions, this is true, by the way, healing broken relationships, shifting limiting beliefs, and activating soul level transformation, she has helped thousands across the globe realign with their divine plan. Her astrological predictions have accurately forecasted some of the most shocking domestic and global events. Lisabetta's work dives far beyond predictions. She channels divine insight to help you uncover hidden truths, unlock emotional healing, and access spiritual power. Her clients often describe their sessions as life-changing, validating, and otherworldly. Lisabetta helps you discover your truth, awaken your inner wisdom, and step into your highest timeline. With her work, your breakthrough is not just possible, it's destined. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode, and I will see you at the end of the show. Hi,
Yeah.
Elizabetta. Thank you so
Hey,
much for coming on to the podcast today.
well, honest to God, I'm so like grateful. I'm honored to be here. I love watching you. You're absolutely fabulous. And so I'm just glad to be part of your journey, you to be part of my journey and, share stories and information because I think that we're in a time and place where people are looking for that. They want to hear stories and they want to like know more, go deeper in their life, make positive changes. And so that's what we're here for.
Absolutely. And I mean, I did a reading with you. I loved it. And I feel like why I wanted to have you on is because there's different avenues for people to really get in touch with themselves inside and spirituality and their soul. And I think a Vedic chart reading can be extremely empowering for people if they've never received one. And in particular, just because it's very different than Western. So actually, we'll just start with that. So that's one of my first questions, and then we can talk a little bit about how you got into it. But what is Vedic astrology exactly, and how does it differentiate from Western astrology?
So, Vedic astrology. So, I'm just going to go into the history a little bit as to
Mhm.
where it comes from, and then I'll talk about the differences.
Mhm.
So, Vedic astrology, there's another name for it called Jyotish or Jyotisha Shastra. It actually originates from ancient India, and it's considered to be part of like the sacred part of the Vedas, which are like the old Hindu spiritual texts, right?
Mhm.
So we're going back in time like thousands of years. And
Mhm.
what Jyotish really means, it means science of light. And so a lot of people have this misconception that astrology is woo-woo, but it's actually based on mathematics. There's a real science there. That's why they call it a science.
Mhm.
And the importance and the aim of Vedic astrology, Jyotish, is really to like illuminate one's karmic path, you know? So there's something called Vedanga, and its meaning is like the six limbs of the Vedas, you know, which is like the core of the Hindu scriptures, you know, and Jyotish is like the specific eye of the Veda. You know, this is the part where you become illuminated, you know, your path is illuminated, you know, through the past, present, and future, right? And it's found in Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda. And so it's all comes from like the earliest written texts. Vedaga Jyotish is approximately like 1200 BCE. And then later on, we had sages like Parashara, Jaimini, Varaham, oh God, I always mispronounce the name, Varahamihira.
We
I'm
gotta
gonna
get
have
that.
astrologer, Vedic astrologers watching this being like, she butchered the crap out
No.
of it. You know,
I'll edit it out. Don't
yeah,
worry.
it's okay. No, you could leave it in because you
Okay.
know what? I'm full of laughs. Believe me, criticism does not bother me.
Okay.
So what the key of these ancient texts are, you know, it combines like the full system of predictive astrology, the classical texts of astrology with the astronomy,
Mhm.
and then Jaime, you know, Sage Jaimini introduced, you know, the system what we call today Vedic astrology, right? So the philosophy behind here is like Vedic astrology, the purpose is like to understand, you know, the deep intertwined, you know, soul with their karma, reincarnation, their dharma. Dharma is like the life path, their purpose, right? And so, you know, the planetary positions at birth reveal to us, you know, past life karma, future karma that's unfolding, you know, the transits, the lessons involved, you know, the work that you have to do. So unlike Western astrology, you know, which focuses more on like personality or like psychology, Vedic astrology has more of an emphasis, not only of the psychological, you know, part of a person, but like their soul evolution, their life purpose, their spiritual growth, you know, and then it also talks about like the timing of events, you know, via the dasha cycles, the planetary, you know, periods, the, you know, what here in Western astrology they call the solar return, which is Varshapala in Vedic astrology. So, you know, the whole purpose is, you know, these are all calculated events. And of course, everything changes, but the whole purpose is really to help you be the best version of you in this lifetime, like with the most deepest awareness and consciousness, but also, you know, with like remedies and stuff. And so the difference, because this is a big this is the big difference because people think astrology, oh, it's astrology. You know, I have had friends and family and other people like, what kind of astrology do you practice? And I always start with, I'm a Vedic astrologer. And they're like, what's that? Like there's an actual
Mhm.
difference, and there is a difference. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Vedic astrology, we use what's called, you know, sidereal system, and that's based on actual constellations in the sky, right? And these are like fixed to star positions. And, you know, we look at the sun, the moon, the rising signs, but they're different in Vedic astrology because Vedic astrology, Western astrology, there's a 23 to 24-degree difference. Whereas if in Western astrology you're a Cancer ascendant, in Vedic astrology, chances are you are a Gemini ascendant, right? So in Western astrology, they use what's called the tropical zodiac, the tropical system. And this is based on the seasons, the equinoxes, right? And they look at it as, you know, a shift with the Earth's axis, you know, precession. And, you know, most people are just familiar with that because you hear a lot of people when they're talking about astrology, or you look at most of the magazines and newspapers here in the US, you know, they look at your sun sign. But
Mhm.
sun sign in Vedic astrology, for example, you know, me and my middle child were both born in August. My sun is in Leo, but his is actually in Cancer. So like the sun sign, you know, in astrology, it's like a Cancer sun is between July 16th to August 15th. And then after that, you know, sun sign in Leo is from August 16th till September 15th. But, you know, they don't look at it. It's different timing with Western astrology. And so also what's very different is like the calculations, you know. In Vedic astrology, we use Ayanamsha, which is like the difference between the sidereal and the tropical zodiac, right? Western astrology doesn't use that. And not only that, but we have a whole house system, or what's called the equal house system, where Western astrology uses Placidus, excuse me,
Mhm.
um, which is a different house
Mhm.
system. Vedic astrology, we have the nine grahas, nine planets. We use Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu, which is the north and the south node. And we actually use a lot of people, Vedic astrologers, we do use the outer planets, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto.
Mhm.
Traditionally, they're not really used, but I use them. I know a lot of other Vedic astrologers don't, use them. In Western astrology, they use the same planets, right, and outer planets, but then they also use like Chiron and the asteroids, where we
Mhm.
in Vedic astrology don't use Chiron and asteroids. And then we also have in Vedic astrology what's called like the aspect system, right? So we know that, certain planets have certain full aspects to signs, where in Western astrology, they use a degree system, which we use degree system as well, but they're focused more on conjunction, opposition, trine, square. So it's there's definitely a difference, and then the purpose, again, the purpose and the philosophy, Vedic astrology, we're looking at your karma, your spirituality, your dharma, we also are looking at what your life purpose is. We're thinking about remedies. Like to me, remedies is a really big thing. How can you help that person? You know what I mean? And we have various remedies. We have meditations, mantras, gemstones, colors, I go a little bit more than that. I like modernize my
Yeah,
remedies
yeah, yeah.
because everybody doesn't want to listen to, a Hindu mantra, right? So like I have to come up with modern remedies. And I do very successfully. Like what can I tell my client to use that's going to be helpful to them and that's going to appeal to them. Where Western astrology, it's not that like that so much. It's more psychological, understanding, but they don't have the remedies, you know what I mean? And then, we also have in Vedic astrology, we have the nakshatras, the yogas, the planetary periods, In Western, they, specifically look at just transits, progressions, retrogrades, and then the other big thing that we have in Vedic astrology is that we have so many divisional charts,
Yeah, the
which I'll be
D9
honest with
chart.
you, I don't know all, like, yeah, we have the Rashi, which is like the birth chart, the natal chart. We have the D9, which is the marriage chart. We have the Dasamsha, which is like your career success chart, your children chart. Western, and there's so many more charts than that. I have a good handle on like the birth chart, the Navamsha, the Dasamsha, not so much on the other ones because I just don't have a real need to use them, but I'm still, I still do take classes every year. I'm trying to like deepen. I have very advanced classes that I take. But in Western astrology, they have their natal chart, solar return chart, and progress chart, which we have a solar return chart too, but we have so many other ones, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So Vedic astrology, it's very specific, very accurate, very awareness based, and the whole point of it is to provide healing, to provide remedies, to provide direction, to provide clarity, because that's what people are really looking for. And I think the biggest thing that most people don't follow through with or understand when you have an astrologer, and this is just across the board, whether you're in Vedic astrology or Western astrology, when you have an astrologer that's good, when you have a session with someone and you go to someone, all this astrologers, first time basis, they're giving you a general overview of your chart. When you go again is when you get more meat and potatoes. Like the
Hmm.
whole purpose of astrology, it's like it's a lifestyle, right? You're looking to improve your life. You're looking to see what's going on. You're looking to just be more conscious based and prepared for periods and lessons and and opportunities that you could take advantage of, or you could transform yourself in some way, shape, or form. Like that's the whole point. It's a lifestyle, but a lot of people have this idea that, you go one time and, you hear some good things and you go to a different one, one time. It's like almost the same thing, but if you really want to improve, find a really good astrologer and just go to them. And my other thing is not every astrologer is intuitive. If you could
Yeah.
find a really good intuitive astrologer,
Hmm.
that is the one you should stick with
Hmm.
because it doesn't help just to, get predictions, just to get the logistics of your chart. You need someone who's going to be in tune to you, who's going to know what's going on beyond what just the chart is showing you,
Yeah.
So that's really, really important because there are, amazing astrologers, both Vedic and even Western. I obviously prefer Vedic because it's
Mhm.
more specific and accurate in my opinion. But then there's astrologers that, they know the science, but like they don't know how to really move you, transform you, give you direction, give you purpose and healing, right? Because you are going to an astrologer for some sort of healing or
Mhm.
remedies, right? Because that's what it is. An astrologer is kind of like a guru. It's like a priest, you're going to, change your life. That's a whole point, right? So if you find a really good one, stick to them because that's when you start to see the real progress, the real fruits of your life. You could make amazing things happen, if you just stick with the right one.
Mhm. You said so many good things. So I'm gonna like back it all the
Go
way
ahead, girl.
to the beginning when you're basically saying it's the chart of the planetary positions at the time of your birth. Can you describe that like energetically? So it makes sense to people how you're born in whatever X location, and then all these planets are in the sky at a certain place. And how
That's
can you make it make sense to people that are like, how does
total.
that affect me? Yeah.
So, at the very moment you're born, right? Because in astrology, Vedic astrology, we need to look at the year that you're born, the day that you're born, the time that you're born, the location that you were born in, right? All of that is going to give us a snapshot of what the stars are in the sky, like where they are, because the sky is like our blueprint. So we know, like, when we want to create a house, right? We all have an architect that creates this floor plan.
Hmm.
It has all these dimensions, it has all these locations. And so an astrological chart gives us the locations, the degrees of where the planets are in all the zodiac signs, meaning zodiac signs Aries to Pisces. Okay. And each one represents a house, houses 1 to 12. So when we determine what house you were born in, that means where your ascendant is, where your rising sign is. So I'm going to use me for example, right? So when I looked at my chart the first time, it said that I was a Gemini ascendant, and I was like, how the hell could that be? There are too many people, right? Because before you know astrology, you have all the negative connotations. Like nobody listens to the good stuff, everyone listens to
Right,
bad stuff.
right, right.
But in Western astrology, they said I was a Cancer ascendant. So Cancer ascendant people are, for instance, have a very tough exterior. They're super sensitive. They make decisions based on their emotions. Gemini people are different. They're like
Opposite,
they
yeah.
they need to constantly be mentally stimulated. That's
Mhm.
me. I'm
Mhm.
always reading, writing, researching, talking because my mind, like I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about work, thinking about my clients, thinking about what I have to do. We're multitaskers. Gemini's are twins. There's the twins for a reason because we don't just stay in one place where a Cancer ascendant could
Mhm.
focus on one thing
Mhm.
and that's it. They do one thing at a time. Geminis are not like that. That's why they call it the multitasker. So
Mhm.
we're thinking about several things, doing several things at once. Sometimes it doesn't get done. And we'll need someone like a Cancer ascendant, to give us some direction. But that, for me, that establishes my whole chart. So I know I'm a Gemini ascendant. I know that my seventh house, which represents marriage and relationships and business partnerships, is in Sagittarius. That means these people are going to have worldly perspectives, you know what I mean? The worldly views, they're going to be Jupiterian in some way because Jupiter rules Sagittarius. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So there's a difference, right? Mercury's more analytical, analyzing, reading, researching. Jupiter is more open-minded, not so critical, jolly guy. So, that means this is my audience. These are the people that are coming to me. These are the people that are attracted to me. So it's important to know that. You know what I mean? For instance, that means I'm going to marry someone who's like a Sagittarius. Me being a Gemini ascendant means that, because my seventh house is a Sagittarius, I am likely to be married sometime in my early 20s, if not earlier, which was true because I got married at 23 years old the first
Wow.
time. So, it sets up the chart. If I was a Cancer ascendant, right? Cancer ascendants usually, their seventh house, for example, is Capricorn. Capricorn's ruled by Saturn. Saturn is long and slow,
Hmm.
long-term, diligent. That means they're attracted to people like this. That means that their future, either future business partner or marriage partner is going to embody, those personalities. They're going to be super grounded because that's what Cancer is. I mean, that's where Capricorn, people are. But it also means Cancer is, Saturn is what? Saturn is delays, taking a long time. So that means whoever's a Cancer ascendant, their marriage, they really aren't meant to marry until later on in life. I always say 30 and later. Why? Because it takes Saturn 30 years to, rotate through all the signs, right? To come back into position. So this is why I found it so much more accurate, because if I listen to Western astrology, they would have said, oh, you're a Cancer ascendant. So that would have meant that I don't get married for the first time, or I'm not ready or mature for marriage until like my 30s, which clearly was not the case. Right.
Hmm.
So simple things like that, it sets the tone for the chart. My 10th house is in Pisces. That means I'm supposed to do something that's like very deep because Pisces is a deep ocean. I'm supposed to do something that's spiritually oriented. I'm supposed to do something that's also Jupiterian because Jupiter rules Pisces. And Jupiter is, worldly knowledge, looking at the future, but also very deep, and mystical in Pisces, and it's also about endings. And it's funny because the planets that I have in my 10th house makes me a psychic medium, makes me someone who's an astrologer, makes me someone who really likes to go, deep into the abyss. I'm not scared to go there, right? But to do
Right.
what? To help elevate people's spirituality because Jupiter is all spirituality. So it's interesting where it sets up. And then like where your ascendant is tells me about your life events. Where your moon is tells me about your emotions.
Hmm.
How do you feel? That's about your inner world. Who are you on the inside?
Hmm.
So when in Vedic astrology, because they don't do this in Western astrology, but in Vedic astrology, when you know someone's moon placement, if you don't have their ascendant, if you know where their moon is, you could actually make predictions from their moon because your moon is like the hidden aspect, right? Because the moon doesn't really come out until nighttime. So that means the stuff that's going on that's unseen.
Hmm.
So it's interesting. You can make predictions from ascendant. You can make predictions even from the moon. You could also make predictions from the sun sign, so long as you have the proper sun sign.
Hmm.
So it's interesting because Western astrology, they look at your rising and the sun sign. Vedic astrology looks at your ascendant and the moon sign, but we also look at the sun sign because what does sun represent? That's your public image. That's how people see you in the outside world. So when people see me, they like Leo, ha, the hair, she's so, and it's true. I have been obsessed with my hair since since I was born. That's like a Leo trait
Yeah, yeah.
also means that there's someone, your sun means where do you stand out? How
Hmm.
do you stand out in the world? So when people see me, they're like, oh, big personality, moving my hands, my hair. Well, yeah, to some degree, but you have to like, if I'm looking at your chart, I have to see, are there any other planets conjunct your sun or moon or in your ascendant? That's going to tell me even more about who you are as a
Hmm.
person. It's going to give me like the flavor of your character. How do you operate in public? You know what I mean? How
Hmm.
do you operate internally? What do you do behind the scenes? If you want to know how someone is behind the scenes, you look at their moon sign. If you want to know about the structure of someone's life, you look at the ascendant. If you want to know how people are seeing their image in the world, you look at their sun My sun is conjunct Saturn. So I come off as a very mature person. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I had, doing work as an astrologer because people looked at me, they saw that I looked very young. I'm going to be 47 this summer. So
Wow.
people see me. Yeah, I know. It's all the good makeup. I have lots of makeup on. And they're like, well, how does she know all this stuff? They're like, wow, do you have any kids? I actually had one client that I was doing a reading for. And she was asking me a bunch of questions and stuff. And she goes, how long have you been doing this for? Like, and I'm like, I've been doing this professionally since, 2011. They're like, oh, you're 30 something. And I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm 40, I'm 40 something years old. They're like, what? It's like, yeah, I
Mhm.
got three kids. They're teenagers now. They're like, really? They're like, I would have never guessed. And so it's funny, being that my son is in Leo, Leo's the fifth house, that's a house of children. So I
Mhm.
come off childlike, right? But I'm not a child. It's a mirage. But you see what I'm saying? It's like if you really want to get to know someone, you got to look at their signs. And if you want to know someone's love language, look at where their Venus is. Is
Mhm.
it in Aries? Is it in Sagittarius? Is it in Gemini? Is it in, if their love language is in, let's say, Libra, for instance, they love to like they have a tendency to be codependent, and they're also very charming, and they also like to do things together as a
Mhm.
couple because Libra is the seventh natural house of the zodiac. That's all about couples and doing things together, working together, being in business together, everything together, together, together. But if your
Mhm.
Venus is in Aries, you need to be independent, have your space, do your own thing, you know?
Yeah.
So it's funny how much you can tell about somebody just based on that alone, like that little stuff that you could get really big, huge information about them through that. It's incredible. That's why I say if you don't want nobody to know who you are, don't give them your birth details.
Yeah, it's true. You know, it's interesting. I'm not an astrologer, but I will say I feel my Western chart, which is what you're saying, it's different. Like my sun, moon, rising is different on my Western from my Vedic. And I feel like my Western chart was very applicable to who I was and my personality and things that I went through up until I had my spiritual awakening. And I feel after I had my spiritual awakening, I can 100% see, because it's like you shed the layers that aren't really you. And then I could 100% see now how I'm way more, uh, my Vedic. And it's just interesting too, because I'll just share mine, for example. I'm Sun, Moon, Libra, and then rising Sagittarius in Western, and then Eastern I'm Virgo, Sun, Moon, and then Scorpio rising. And so those are very different like think about
Very,
that, like
yeah.
completely different people and personalities. And I remember when I think I got my chart read, uh the first time I got my Vedic chart read, I think was 2012. And it just changed my whole like opinion on everything in life. And she was also like, this is who you are. Stop acting like,
Yeah.
nice girl, like always having to people please. She's like, look at your chart. Like, this is who you really are. Like, own that. And it was a journey that I went on from that very first time I got that reading. And what do you think about that with like the difference between the two and how, or maybe if you've seen that where people maybe do resonate with that, but then there is a switch. I don't know.
Yeah. So that's an excellent question.
Hmm.
It's interesting because that's why I said earlier in the video, there are amazing Western astrologers, amazing Vedic astrologers.
Hmm.
What really is the key to being an amazing astrologer, period, is your intuition, right?
Hmm.
So, but what I've noticed, and I'll speak from my own experience like you, I was like, okay, I thought I was this, this, and this. But then when I started doing Vedic astrology, it was like, first I was critical. I was like, oh, I don't have this like they do. I don't have like this
Right,
yoga.
right, right.
My planets aren't here. And
Hmm.
it was almost like at first I had like a rude awakening. But then
Hmm.
I was like, oh my God. I was like, I started to discover, really discover, rediscover who I was, and everything just made complete sense. And in that process, not only was it transformational and healing, but it helped me to learn how to love me the right way,
Mm,
if
hmm
that makes sense.
hmm
Because I think that the biggest struggle people are having is loving and appreciating who they are and learning how to embrace who they are in the most positive and uplifting way, right? And
hmm
it's because people, we already, like, especially today, right? We have all this social media, we have all this celebrities, we have all these um illusions and fantasies of who people should be in authentic versions of themselves under the guise of being their most authentic version of themselves, but you really don't know until you look at your chart. And when you do, at first it's criticism, then it's like, the truth, the breakthrough, then you start to go into the healing and then forgiveness, right? Because I think what I'm trying to get at, and correct me if I'm not getting to the point, but I think people are trying to really find out who the heck they are so they have permission to be who they are.
Mm, yeah, I think that's exactly very similar to what I said. It was almost like this awakening of like that this is who I am. I've just hidden it under the surface of wanting to be people please and be nice and whatever at that point in my life. And yeah, it was like a big reckoning and awakening. I just remember like walking out of that reading and it was like out of a movie. Like there probably like a building would blow up behind me and fire everywhere. And I was like, yeah, like
I love it.
it changed a lot for me. So yeah, but I also will say, like, in a personal example, there was a relationship I was in for a very long time. And in Western, we are those opposite signs, like what the sister signs they call it, like when it's like opposite ends of
Yeah,
the wheel.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like Libra, Aries, or whatever. And it was the most karmic, challenging, soul growing, whatever, I'll only say positive things, relationship I've ever been in. And then also, when I looked at it in the Vedic perspective, you know how they compare like 36 points for marriage or whatever.
Yes, yes, yes.
We did not pass the test. So I was like, thank God. So I was like, okay, there's both of these systems work. They're just different lenses and ways of looking at it. But I do feel because I do respect both. And I do feel like there's value in both. But I do feel that in the terms of Vedic, like the predictive aspect is just you just can't compare. Like, yeah, at all. Like when you look at your chart and you look at everything that's happened, and if you saw a chart, like your chart, and then you looked at it in the past, a lot of people would say, yeah, I can't believe that. This thing happened with my relationship. This thing happened with my health. This thing happened with my work. 5 years ago, it's literally in my chart. And I think that is something that Vedic astrology can do better than any
So
other type.
totally, I agree with you. But now I want to go even deeper with that because you brought up something that I didn't bring up. But
Okay.
you were talking about when they do it's called like the marriage compatibility. It's called
Yes.
Guna matching. It's a crazy name because it's Hindu. It's not
Yeah.
English, you guys. So it's a compatibility between two people, right? And
Yeah.
what they do is there's like a system that does all the calculations.
hmm
So I'm going to use me for examples. I'm married twice. Apparently, according to that system, I had more compatibility, with ex-husband than I do with current husband. Me and current husband, when I learned astrology, and I started, learning it the right way, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, the compatibility is terrible because we had so many 212 relationships with several planets in the charts, which makes it like it's a self-sacrificing relationship. There's a lot of sacrifice involved, in order to move
Mm-hmm.
forward
hmm
different areas in our life.
hmm
And I was like, okay, God, because my Venus is in Virgo, not the most happiest place for Venus to be,
Same.
right? But Venus people with Venus and Virgo, they are so good at relationship healing, and money
Mm.
healing and problem solving with respect to relationships and money. That's their job, right? We're Venus in Pisces, where it's exalted, it's all about enjoying it, and it's the best, right? So that means we just have to work harder with our Venus, right? Because we have more of an analytical tendency towards relationship, which I have a stellium in Virgo, so I'm very analytical.
Same.
And I was like, okay, God. I was like, I know you don't bring me into these situations. You're not looking to make my life easy. There has to be a purpose to this, right?
Hmm.
So I'm doing my prayer. It's obvious it's a long work in progress, but I'll tell you, remember how I was telling you I have like the secret sauce to,
Yes, yeah.
relationships and everything. I found the secret sauce. Secret sauce works. So the whole point is if you're going to a really good astrologer, someone who's intuitive, someone who has a secret sauce, it doesn't matter how challenging the chart is, you can heal it and make the relationship amazing.
Mm,
The whole purpose of astrology, right? The original idea was for it not to be so much work, for it not to learn. But you know what? We don't become professionals, experts in anything that we do unless we've dealt with challenges. That's just the bottom line.
hmm, hmm,
Nobody becomes an amazing surgeon by like performing on one person. You know
hmm,
what I mean? And having an easy, no, that's not how you become a pro at anything. And it could be anything, being a pro at as a mom, being a pro as a father, being a pro as a boyfriend, girlfriend, doctor, caretaker, friend. So, whatever it is, any area of your life, you have to learn how to be a pro in something, right? We all have natural gifts, but our greatest weakness in our charts are really our greatest strengths, as crazy
Mhm.
as that sounds.
No, it's
It's
true.
funny in astrology, in Vedic astrology, you could have Nichbanga, which means that, there's a cancellation for the negativity. That means, when you have an exalted planet, that means something comes to you easy. But if something comes to you easy, you're super lazy about it.
Hmm, hmm.
You're not putting so much effort, you're not utilizing the gift necessarily, right?
Totally.
If something's challenging, you're utilizing that gift. You're working harder on it. So for you, you have your Venus and Virgo. That's not a bad thing. That means you're supposed to help solve people's problems with respect to love and relationships and creativity. And you will do it
I don't
because,
know about that.
no, you will do it. I didn't think so. I know there's like an age gap between you and I. I didn't think so years ago, but when I discovered that secret sauce, I was like, yep. I was like, I could do anything now. Now I'm like, I could do anything. I could help anybody with anything.
Mm,
So that's the other thing, and I'm glad that you brought it up because people get discouraged because old school astrologers like, this planet's debilitated, which means that you're going to suffer. Yeah,
right.
there is some suffering involved.
Right. Yes.
But
Unavoidable.
the suffering only comes when you're resisting to really do the work and to make something happen for yourself.
Yeah. So just to get this straight, like, do you feel that, let's just say you're in a relationship and you said like compatibility wise, this one you said wasn't as good, but you can heal it. Do you really feel like you could heal anything, or do you feel like there are just some relationships that are just not compatible enough and the chart kind of says what it is? Do you know what I mean? Because there's like points, there's a point system.
So I'll tell you what it depends on,
Okay.
right? It depends on the dasha cycle that you're in. It depends on like what
Mm, mm,
what period of learning are you in, you
mhm,
know?
mhm,
Because if you're in a specific dasha cycle that's actually not going to be that's meant for you to focus more on if you're in a dasha cycle that's meant for you to focus more on like your love relationship, then
mhm,
that's a good time for you to do the work and make that relationship work, right?
mm, mhm,
But it also has to do with understanding your love language. If you understand your love language, for example, with respect to relationships, if you embrace your love language, if you embrace your Venus,
mhm,
then guess what? It's so much easier for you to have a more healthier dynamic with your partner. But it really stems from your mindset. Do you
mhm,
understand it?
mhm,
Are you taking the action to embrace what you understand? Then you can do it. So it's really has to do with your dasha cycle, what cycle you're in. And also, are you willing to do it, or are you still going to stay stuck in your mindset that, you know what? It's too much work because you're just not ready for it. And some people are just not ready for it, you
mhm,
know?
mhm,
So the beauty about life, and this is what I love about life, relationships are amazing because they provide you unbelievable lessons, knowledge, experience, growth. So there's no
mhm,
such
mhm,
thing, if you look at it, there's really no such thing as a bad relationship when technically,
mhm.
yes, it could be filled with tears, drama,
Right.
fights, loss of money, depending if you're going to a divorce or you're
Mhm,
break, like, there's all sorts of situations.
mhm,
but it's not bad because you're supposed to learn from it. Your most
Hmm.
challenging experience is where you have your greatest growth. If you're resisting the growth, you keep experiencing the same situation over and over again. If you say, hey, you know what? I know I could get through this, then that's when you're like, I could get through this. The biggest problem I have to say that's preventing people from getting through it is the social media, the celebrities, the
Mm,
TV. There's
mm,
so much crappy music. And it's like it keeps reiterating messages that are not conducive to living a very healthy,
yeah,
happy life.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean? So, and that also explains why today there's almost like a 50% divorce rate. Second marriage has like a 60 something percent divorce rate. Third marriage is like
yeah,
80% divorce rate.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
so you're seeing a lot of couples coming together and just not getting married because they're just afraid of going through that experience. Hence, one of the couples that I love to talk about, Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell.
Mhm.
They're like together forever and they didn't get married because they finally understood. And it's not just about compatibility. There's compatibility in their chart, but then there's also there's also some placements where, if somebody says, hey, Lissabeta, do you think that I should date this person based on these placements? My inclination would be like, if you're looking for a smoother relationship, no. But some people thrive on challenges, chaos, ups and downs. Like they need those peaks and valleys, that's just part of their personality. So the relationship ends up working a little bit better for them. You know what I mean? So
This,
that's why it's so
yeah,
important to really dive deep in your chart, but also to see the right astrologer that could give you the right
right.
advice and direction. You know
This,
what I mean?
yeah, this is just bringing up so many thoughts in my mind. So first off, like, I'm glad you brought up the whole divorce rate thing because that's the thing that I think a lot of people are like, for example, arranged marriages, especially like in Eastern countries versus our love marriages here in Western countries. And they're like, well, love marriages don't work because look at the divorce rate, this and that. But you're kind of saying like, okay, just for people that don't know, like in India, when an arranged marriage happens, people you compare the chart first. You don't meet somebody until you compare the charts.
For the
And then
chart
if
first.
the chart works, then you get to meet the person, you see the picture, and then if the families like each other and they like each other, then there's marriage. But it's like chart first, relationship after. And you're kind of like saying, no. Like let's do
Not
like you're in the
necessarily true.
right.
It's not
Like you
necessarily true.
right, because you're kind of like so I'm seeing because the argument is like, well, this is a better system because look, our divorce rate's less, but who knows how happy, things are, and maybe like there's many other factors that go into that. But I do wonder, like, when it comes to that, and couples meeting in an arranged marriage versus meeting in a love marriage, and then comparing their charts, and let's say the chart's really good or the chart sucks, and then you're like, it's really the question, I think, fundamentally and philosophically is like, well, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, is this, if you, if your chart kind of basically says, let's say with a person, like, this maybe will not work out at all for either of you, and you get that kind of foresight, like, will you still do it? Will you still go through with it? And maybe there's karma for that and it has to be fulfilled with the soul contract. And maybe also there's growth that you need to fulfill, and otherwise you wouldn't be in this relationship. So, like, tell me your thoughts on all of this because there's so many things coming up with this
So
topic.
there's so much there's so much to unpack with what you're asking me.
I know.
So let's start with the first
Hmm.
point.
Hmm.
So Kevin Costner, let's talk about Kevin Costner and his most recent wife. What was her name? Christine something.
Hmm.
And I looked at their chart. They actually had a compatible chart, but because she was going through a specific dasha, she was feeling very neglected in the relationship. She felt like she needed more. She would
Hmm.
have seen an astrologer. Astrologer would have said, okay, you know what? You're going to be going through this experience, but this is what you can do XYZ to mitigate that situation. So this way you could do the inner work and not project what's going on the outside. And
Hmm.
then she could have ended up staying very well, continuing her marriage with Kevin Costner. Another example, I had a client that I don't know if you're familiar with the term Sati Sati. For those of
Yeah.
you that are
Yeah.
watching, Sati Sati is when Saturn transits the 12th house from your moon sign, then the second house conjuncting your moon, then the third house, meaning the second house from the moon. And so Saturn does a 7.5 year transit. And when that comes about, people tend to feel very isolated, alone. They have to work really hard. There's a lot of pressure to perform, but there's also times where, depending on, the moon's placement, if it's conjunct other planets and if it's just alone, it can make people feel super isolated, super negative, depressed. Their health starts to get affected. Some cases, not all cases, very few cases, some people end up taking their life because they don't understand what's going on. They don't know how to mitigate the situation. Does it mean that because Saturn's doing that transit, that it's okay for them to take their own life? They would have seen, and I've had clients that were on the verge of, they're like, I had enough, can't stand my husband, don't want my kids, don't want a parent, I don't even want to work. I'm just in the lowest of the low. I actually had one client who not only was going through Sati Sati, but Pluto was conjuncting their moon.
Mm.
And so they were at the point where they were they literally were having conversations to euthanize themselves with, people in Switzerland where you could do it legally.
Oh,
You know
wow.
what I mean? And I'm like, let's stop here.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know your problem started on this date. How do I know? Because this and this, because I could see the degrees. You're like, yeah, that's exactly. I know you're feeling this, XYZ. This is what you need to do. So I give them a whole bunch of remedies and vitamins and minerals that they need to take for their health. I give them remedies of other things that they need to do to exercise in their daily life.
Mm-hmm.
I make sure that I have, text messages or calls with them for like the next, following weeks and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I tell them, this is temporary. This is supposed to help you come into realizations about things that are going on with you internally and
Mm-hmm.
externally.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a punishment time, but because you are overwhelmed
Mm-hmm.
with the feeling and the emotion and the vibration that you're experiencing, we need to remedy this situation. So it's an internal thing, vitamins, food, other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And externally, other things that they have to do. And then, I'm here basically their therapist, life coach, counselor. That's how I'm acting, helping them through that. Now, technically, right? If they didn't have a conversation with me, they would have just flew their butt to Switzerland and called it a day. And that
Mm-hmm.
would have been the end of it. But because they're going through that, this is where the value of astrology is. This is why it's so important, man, to have like awareness of where you're at, what's going on, what you're doing, because there's outside energies influencing you. And sometimes it could be so heavy, right? Like you can in
Mm-hmm.
relationships,
Mm-hmm.
you can from the world. And somebody could be like, could it be their karma? Is it their karma to learn the lessons about those areas of their life? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have the awareness, you're not going to be able to make a better decision. It's like you're throwing an adult in the kitchen. You're like, make me pasta. And you're like, well, what's that?
Mm-hmm.
What do I do? How does somebody make pasta? Where somebody with experience would have been like, hey, dun, 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 dun. They would put the chef on, they would throw it in the water, had the sauce, right? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I'm answering your question straight. I'm trying my best to answer it straight. But the point is, awareness is key. Yes, some things are going to happen. The event, the karma is she had to go through that experience to be aware of things outside of herself and also inside of herself. That's the karma. Doesn't mean that that is a time for her to die. Hey, you know what? It could be the time where she's thinking, hey, life or death, but doesn't mean that she has to die at that very moment. I had one of my very first teacher. She was going through a Jupiter transit. Now, Jupiter is not always the best planet for Gemini ascendants. Not Jupiter transit, Jupiter Mahadasha cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And so she knew that it was going to affect her health, her well-being, because it's the seventh house Lord, which is also the Maraka house, meaning the killer house in Vedic astrology. And so she was being extra careful and extra mindful of the things that she was doing, her relationships, her health, etc.
Mm-hmm.
She had the awareness, so she knew she had to be mindful. It was a lot easier for her to be mindful because she would obviously be researching remedies. She would be doing and taking all these actions. But That's the whole point. It's the science, it's a science of light, it's a science of illuminations, illuminating your mind. Yes, there's a lot of karma, you're supposed to be here at this place at this time, you're supposed to meet that person, but what you make out of that situation, what you make out of that relationship is still free will.
Hmm.
So I think that's important for people to understand. You still have free will. Are you open to it?
Yeah, I feel like, okay, so I feel totally agree with you on the perspective shift, the awareness of things, because I feel like with astrology and with what I do with Akashic readings, same thing. Like where someone's really struggling in a situation and then they come into a reading and then the Akash gives them the higher perspective of why it's happening. What is the higher purpose? What is the lesson behind this? Why is this actually happening in your life? And literally the perspective change is what changes the whole situation and it makes it
Yes.
bearable. They move through it faster. Like when it comes to familial relationships, marriages, divorces, whatever someone's going through and they come to me. And that's why I love astrology because I feel it's the same thing, but I feel
Yeah.
it's like it's on paper, it's like,
Yes, on paper. But
and so,
see,
yeah, I love when like a client does my work and then also astrology because it's like, okay, here's double confirmation.
yeah, because you're marrying the two. You're
Yes,
seeing the
yes,
big picture,
yes.
and it's funny because you said yes, you change the perspective, but when you change the perspective, you know what else you're changing? Your future.
Totally.
I have a friend of mine. We both have our moon in Pisces. She's having a shitty time. She's like, "Well, how are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, there's stuff going on, but I'm doing great." She goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm doing a lot of this and that." And she goes, "Okay." I was like, start doing, start following through, start doing the exercises. She's feeling a little better, which is great, but she has to be consistent. Obviously, everybody has tough
Hmm.
schedules.
Hmm.
She's being more consistent, but she's getting out of it. But it just goes to show two people could have their same moon sign and just have a completely different experience. And we're
Right.
both in Sati Sati,
Mhm.
both her and I. And she's feeling like it's harder. And I feel like I'm going through a liberation period where I'm breaking boundaries. And she feels
Mm.
like she's facing boundaries. I'm like, but yeah, but you could get through. I'm like, you've been doing this longer than me.
Mhm.
But this is where remedies are really important.
Yeah, and I think just vision too, like because I know
Having a
for
vision for
yeah,
sure.
because for you, you could say like in an astrology chart, it'll be like from this period of time to this period of time, this is when it switches, and you'll have a definite thing. And I know within the records, it's not like necessarily definite dates, but they'll show me metaphors of like if someone's on a racetrack, how many more laps they have, how far they are till the finish line with this period of their life that's really challenging is going to end, or if they're in a forest, like how many more miles they have left, like how much they've done. And it just puts it into perspective because I don't know if you find this, and I try to keep things more timeless for the podcast, but like in this current period of time, I have found so many people are at the end stages of a major karmic cycle in their lives. And like they're almost at the end. And it's almost like consistently, I'd say for the last month, in every single reading, they are like, but they don't know that. So they're like freaking out, like, I'm gonna give up. I'm so tired. Like, this sucks, like, all of that. And then they're like, just keep going. Like, you're almost there. Like, we're ending stuff and we're shifting into this new timeline. Do you see that?
I'm so like seriously happy that you brought that up
Was what I'm seeing. Yeah, for the last month or so.
because you are so on par with that. So astrologically, we had this amazing solar eclipse happen in Pisces, and it was conjunct so many stellium of planets, and we haven't had anything like that in Pisces. I try to go back past 2000 years, I can't even find it. It is
Mm-hmm.
so unique. Plus, in Chinese astrology, we're in what's called a snake year.
Yeah.
So in Vedic astrology, that's the 12th house of the zodiac. That's endings. That's like putting things to bed,
Mm-hmm.
putting things to rest, letting it go. That's also where
Mm-hmm.
your subconscious mind is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's like, 12th house, that's like symbolic of the bed. That's where you rest your head. That's the thoughts that you have right before you go to sleep. Those are the thoughts you have right before your life is about to end, right? That's your 12th house.
Mm-hmm.
And so that coupled with, the snake year energy in Chinese astrology, which is all about shedding the skin.
Right.
I said to my audience, I said, who you are at the beginning of 2025 is not who you're going to be at the end of 2025. You're going to be somebody completely different. I'm seeing it in myself. I talked to you before we started this interview.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm making so many changes in
Hmm.
my business because I finally have that secret sauce. Like I've experimented it, I tried it, I know it's good, true, it's ready to go. And I'm all about not just providing the information and doing, predictions. I want to help people like really, really, really heal and transform themselves in a major way, not just one-on-one sessions. I want to do it big. I really want to help the world in a really big way.
Hmm.
And that's where people are right now. They're like, you know what? I'm not this person anymore. I
Yes.
feel this. So they're doing the work. It's almost like you said, they're on the racetrack
Hmm.
getting to the finish line. This is what this year is about because it's all about transformation in the biggest, best way possible. And so
Hmm.
if you, the audience who's watching this right now, and you're feeling like, oh my God, I'm hitting challenges and brick walls. That's because the universe is really forcing you to take action because you've been so resistant.
Hmm.
They're
Hmm.
saying stop, stop. It's almost like, I'm sure you heard, you put a little fire underneath your butt, you're going to jump up and go. Well, that's what the universe is doing. So
Right, right, right.
don't stop complaining and be resist. I can't believe that's happened. No, say, you know what? Thank you, God, for making that happen for me. Quick story. And I'm just like stupid example. Driving my car. It's really funny. I'm driving my car. I get pulled over. I'm like, why is this cop pulling me over? And he's like, registration and license, please. And I'm like, why'd you pull me over? I'm like, because I know I'm not a bad driver. He's like, he goes, license or registration, please. And I was like, dude, why'd you pull me over? And he goes, you got your registration's expired. What? In my mind, I'm like, why did my husband let this happen? Because I don't deal with any of that stuff. I leave it up to him, even though it says it on my window. I'm like oblivious
Hmm.
to all that stuff. And we always go to New York a lot. We go to the city, and if something like that happens, they could give you a ticket. Some of them are more aggressive. They'll move your car. There's all
Yeah,
situations that could arise as a result, depending on where you go.
yeah.
And I was like really nervous. I'm like, how am I not prepared? I'm all tight about this. I'm calling my husband. He's not answering the phone. I keep calling because I want him to send me a picture of my
Yeah.
updated insurance, car insurance,
Mhm.
because the one I had in my car is expired, but I saw the insurance at home and we just
Right,
forgot
right,
it
right.
in the car.
Oh,
So
okay.
finally I see it in Earthling and I got all ruffled. My husband goes, it only happens to you. It only happens to you. And I was like, no, I was like, I got off with a warning. All I got to do is, just pay for the thing and you could pay for it online, the registration. But I got all ruffled up. But I said, I was laughing. And I looked at the cop and I said, you know what? I said, thank you so much for pulling me over. And he starts laughing because he's like, nobody says that. Nobody says thank you for pulling me over. I was like, seriously, I said, because I could have had an issue in the city. I could have been in the city. Some cops, there's a lot of stress in New York City going on with a lot of the
Yeah,
politics and stuff
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
I could have been dealing with someone who was on a bad day, having a bad day, and he could have been like, I get out of the car, I'm giving you a ticket, or I'm taking your car. Like it could have just turned ugly. But I
Hmm.
said, you know what? Thank you so much. And I had the opportunity, and the guy was great. And I went, I walked home, and I just laughed. And it's a silly, stupid story, but the lesson is huge because the lesson is when you're going through that, you have to look at what was the positive such part of the situation. Well, I could have avoided that. So God is helping me out not to go through some traumatic experience because I personally don't like going to New York City and I don't like dealing with getting pulled over. You know what I mean? I was
Hmm.
only a few blocks away from my home when I got pulled over, but it could have been a situation that I didn't like.
Hmm.
So, people, you're in a situation you don't like. It's really an opportunity for you to make a change, to do something different. It's an opportunity for you to, maybe improve your love life, maybe get another job, maybe expand your business, maybe work for someone else, maybe quit altogether and start traveling the world. You know what
Hmm.
I mean?
Hmm.
Maybe, you could be a mom. Like, there's just so many possibilities. Don't get tight about it. Do something about it.
Yeah. I mean, and then also from like a records perspective, it absolutely could be divine protection, making things less than what it could have been.
Yeah.
It also could be like a signal like, okay, it's time for me to get more organized or whatever and be more independent. Like, whatever the lesson may be, that's how I always look at things. But I don't know if that's what I go into my records for. When something like that happens, I'm always like, what am I supposed to be learning from this current experience to prevent something like that from happening again, you know?
Well, yeah, because psychologically, people are programmed to believe, at least right now in this present, moment, people are programmed to believe that if they're, if they're having a problem or a bad day, that, that's like it's like a bad thing, like
Mm-hmm.
it means because somebody's giving you an evil eye or someone's trying to cause
Right,
trouble.
right, right.
But no, we attract experiences for our own personal growth. And if you're someone who wants to be really successful and really motivated to do amazing, wonderful things in your life, whether it's personally or professionally,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to attract issues. Why? Because you need that to be the best at whatever it is that
Mm-hmm.
you want to do or be or, create in your life.
Hmm. Evil eye is real, though. I will say that.
It is, but it's temporary. It doesn't
Yeah.
last long.
Yes. Yes. You're Albanian, right? So you,
Yeah. So you girl, we know all about that.
I'm
I'm
like, it is
telling
real
you.
though. I don't want to discount that. It's 100%. It does occur.
But it's
Um,
temporary.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
gotta be honest with you, I have a lot of Albanian clients and a lot of them come to me and they're like, I swear I think there's a curse on me. I went to go see someone, there's a curse on me, blah, 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 and
Hmm.
you could tell in astrology if they're legit, if somebody really is going to constantly have like that bad luck, that
Yeah.
challenge, they could overcome it. They just have to do hard work, remediation,
Hmm.
Most of the time it's a transit. There's something to learn. They get over it. Some of them I've had clients are like, I'm ready to get, I'm like, no, it's going to get better. Like give it a few months. And then everything like changes,
Yeah.
for them. And they're like, you saved my marriage. I'm like, well, I'm supposed to help you, right? But it's not, it's very, most of what people think is evil eye. It's just a temporary challenging transit, right? And there's a lesson there to be learned. But I'm not gonna lie to you, I do like with my family, sage my home regularly, I do my salt around my property, make
Yeah.
sure no
Yeah. Yeah.
heebie-jeebies decide to, make a home here because they're not welcomed. You know what I mean? There's things that
Yeah.
I do, especially when my children are born, like, we have a thing where when the kids are born and they come home to the, for the first time, you put a little sugar on it to make sure that the life is nice and sweet and,
Hmm. Hmm.
blessed. Like you put a sugar on the baby's head. We have a lot of that. And that's actually important to do. Rituals are really important to do. Just like you have a ritual when you get up, you brush your teeth, you wash your face. Why you're doing it to maintain your youth, your health, to help you wake up for the day. Rituals are not a bad thing. But it's understanding it's about being aware and conscientious about what you're doing. What is the purpose of what you're doing, right?
Yes, yes. I always say that a ritual is just simply anchoring down into the physical reality, what is happening spiritually, so it can manifest. Because a
100%.
lot, yeah, because like in my work as well, like we can do so much. And then a lot of the times, if there's like a major change that needs to happen in someone's life, they will prescribe something like they need to go into the water with like a note that they've written of everything they want to release, go under, or sometimes it's a fire thing, or sometimes it's these like ceremonial things, rituals that happen with nature because that is how you can close the chapter in your physical reality, anchor it
Yeah.
down, move forward. And there's something so powerful to it. And I think there's a difference between like that versus superstition, and I guess
Yeah.
like it's a very fine line, but at the same time, there's so much value in ritual. So yes.
So it's so beautiful that you mentioned it because rituals are it's your physical way of communicating your intention with the universe.
Yes. Anchoring
People
it.
don't
Yeah.
see it. It's you anchor it. You're making it solid. You're making it real. You're setting your intention in stone.
Mhm.
Rituals are so important. I just don't like, because of media, the world, they put such a negative connotation on it. I remember when I was using the term ritual with my clients, I'm like, ritual, you have one when you wake up, right? I'm like, you have
Exactly. Yeah.
one when you go to church to baptize your kid, correct? They're like,
Hmm.
I didn't think of it that way. I'm like, that's what it is. You're doing something physically to set an intention for something to manifest, like you said, positively in your life. It's important to understand that and to be aware of that. It's a form of communication
Hmm.
um, between the universe, the spirit,
Hmm.
and the physical. So yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's important for people to understand
Yeah.
fully.
Yeah, and I do feel like people should also just remember there's positive and negative of everything. So rituals, anything, intentions,
Yep.
anything. There's you can work it from a positive, perspective and path or negative. But this brings me like all the way back around to something we were talking about, which is related within the chart, which is the aspect of karma versus free will. And I think in like Vedic charts, especially with Vedic charts, which are very predictive, if you go to the wrong astrologer, you can leave in complete fear and like paralysis because they'll be like, oh, this is going to occur and this and blah, 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 and, whatever. Or you can leave very empowered. And so how does that interplay work of the past life karma that we come in with, how it's laid out in the chart, and how with our free will can we transcend that aspect? Is it possible to almost like you would say sublimate or move past and above the energies of your chart and create and forge your own path and destiny?
So, you know that past, present, and future is operating on the same timeline.
Hmm.
Okay. Years ago, I was in meditation. I said, God, help me understand reincarnation, past lives, the timeline. Help me understand it.
Hmm.
He showed me was a horizontal line like this, and a bunch of lines that were going vertically.
That's exactly how I see it in the records, like
You
that.
see it like that
I see it
too?
like that, but usually with dots instead of lines. But that's how, yeah,
So they showed me all these lines.
be
All
funny.
these lines is all my lifetime. I'm the horizontal line, the soul operating multiple points, right? So your karma is obviously, so that people could visualize it, right? Because
Yeah.
people tend to be very visual. Your karma is your past life energy, your unresolved issues, meaning like it could be good stuff too, it could be not so good stuff. Good stuff meaning like, you had a longing for someone, and this lifetime you need to be with them. You need to have that opportunity to see them. Or you could have been, a really screwed up person, and now you have people in this lifetime doing screwed up things to you so you could learn, understand, and evolve deeply, right?
Hmm.
But your free will, so the karma is the event is going to happen. The person is going to come into your life. How you react based on the experience that you've had in this current lifetime is your free will.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's the free will,
Hmm.
right? That's you deciding, okay, well, how am I going to go about this?
Hmm.
It's like those like people that got a celebrity crush, right? They've been doing for a long time. They were working on it, they've been working on it to meet this person because they've been having some unresolved issues because they want to be an actor and they just need to be touched by that person's presence and acting skills, whatever. And so they finally have the opportunity. The karma is they're going to meet that person, right? They could go, oh yeah, or they could use it as a moment and be like, wow, this is real. This is my opportunity, and say, you know what? I'm so excited to meet you. Um, Please give me some lessons, show me, help me understand so I can, be better at what I'm doing. So I could, maybe be where you are today. You know what I mean? Or the other person, or that person could be, the person could be like, you know what? I want to date you. So this way I can have notoriety and, be an actor like you, but, do it through my relationship with you. There's two ways to go about it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's where the free will comes in. How do you want to use that opportunity, that karmic event that was going to happen no matter what? How do you want to make use of that? Because still, we have in astrology, we have Rahu, our destination, right? K2 is where we're coming from, our past life karma. Rahu is our destination, what we need to fulfill our purpose in this lifetime. So you're going to fulfill that purpose, you're going to fulfill that destination, but it's all up to you because this is whole new territory.
Hmm. Hmm.
This is all new territory. For instance, I have my Rahu in my fourth house. Being a mom, all new territory. Healing and thinking about the heart, all new territory. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? So like when I get into like being stuff, having complicated love relationships with people, it could be family, it could be intimate partner, it could be friends, could be, work people, coworkers, et cetera, et cetera. How am I going into that, relationship? How am I How am I using my heart strings?
Mhm.
How am I pulling my own heartstrings? How am I allowing them to be pulled?
Right.
You
Because I
know, so
know,
this is
yeah.
where
Go ahead, go
this
ahead.
this is where it plays out. And so then, of course, when we pass away, come right back in. Most of us come right back in, and we don't all have to.
No.
Most of us come back in because they don't know any other way, and they haven't been, educated in the lifetime to not have to come back in. But most of us come back in, and so again, we are using the experience from this current lifetime to play out another story in another lifetime. So how do you want to play out that story? Depends on how you're playing your current story. That's why your future always depends on what you're doing right this moment,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And
Mm-hmm.
so let's say you have rough karma with somebody, like
Mm-hmm.
my husband, I had Akashic records done, many years ago, right when I started dating him. And I wish I knew the gentleman's name. He's a very, very, he was a much older man,
Mm-hmm.
living in Connecticut in this like tiny studio apartment, and he was like the sweetest man. He was so good, and I already knew that I had karma with my husband.
Well, how
And we
could we
taught
not,
me,
right? Your
yeah,
husband.
yeah, right. At that time, I didn't know how deep it was because I wasn't,
Right.
an
Right.
expert in Vedic astrology. And then I started, doing research, and then I started doing deeper meditations and everything. And I'm like, my husband, we have romantic past life, business life, past life, adversaries, competitors,
Mm-hmm.
like everything. And we keep coming back together.
Yep.
So it's funny in this current lifetime, we're best friends. We're, there we go. We're best friends. We're, obviously lovers. We're married. We
Mm-hmm.
partner up with business, meaning like we go to each other for business. I help him with mine. Sometimes he helps me with ours. We're parent, like there's a lot of roles that we're playing together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay, when I came to the realization, I said, okay, I was talking to, my husband's higher consciousness, because, men don't always want to hear
No.
women, although like he's very good and supportive of what I do, doesn't always want to hear what I'm saying. So I'm talking to his highest consciousness, and I'm like, okay, get it really good this lifetime so we don't have to repeat anything from the past, and I had a really good
Yes.
soul to soul moment. And it was actually very changing, and it triggered certain things in our relationship experience, which improved stuff. But I didn't know that, you know what I mean? I would have just like think like what the hell? I would have felt just super overwhelmed by the relationship. You know what I mean? It could have felt like suffering because I didn't understand the deeper meaning of what was going on. But, free
Yeah.
will made a conscious effort and decided to take some matters to my own hand and, you know, do what people would call the woo.
No, I love that. I think that's so effective. I was taught that a long time ago. It's called like they called it talking spirit to spirit, and it's like it's even effective for a business meeting, before you go in just to or something really important like that, or even a conflict, where you get the higher, but it's only really possible, I think, if you come from a more neutral place. But what you were saying was, it's interesting. It's reminding me, I don't know if you've seen this movie, it just came out called Past Lives.
Who stars in it? I don't think I
Oh,
saw it.
it's a film. It's a more of a foreign film, but it's like based in Brooklyn. It's beautiful, beautiful movie. I think they just released it on Netflix, so if you have Netflix, you can watch it too. The ending is just, oh my gosh. I'm not going to say anything because I just want you to experience it. But they have this concept that if you are getting married to somebody, you have already had thousands of lives before that. There's no other way you could get married to a person unless you have accumulated that much karma to be
Yeah,
with that person. And what I've found within my Akashic readings is that usually when someone's in a marriage, that is the strongest contract we can have in this
oh my
lifetime
God.
because it's voluntary.
So
Like,
true.
and it's what you were saying is like, this is the one, well, you're in an elevated place where you're desiring that to wrap things up and not have to repeat it. But a lot of times that's unconsciously what is happening within a
Yeah.
marriage, whether it's ends in divorce or just goes on forever and, until people pass. It's they're wrapping up those final layers and lessons of karma, and that's why they get married. That's what I've
Yes.
seen. Yeah.
And I love that you're able to see that in the Akashic records. Like that's super cool.
It's two
You
different, it's like the same thing, but just different methodologies of getting there.
it's so interesting because when I was a kid, I think I was 16 years old, and I was into astrology, I was into tarot readers, I was into mediums, I was into all the spiritual stuff, but a part of me was like, there has to be some kind of scientific reasoning for all of this. And I remember clear as day, 16 years old, sitting on my bed, and I'm like, God, I'm
Mhm.
like, please help me understand the spirituality part of life and the science. Please help me merge it together. I had no idea that he set me on the path,
Mhm.
hence here I am, I'm doing astrology where I have a physical understanding because I like to put stuff to paper,
Mhm.
but it's amazing to me how you were able to access that without having to go through the astrological part of it, and it's true. It's absolutely true what you're saying. Being married is like the biggest contract that you could make in any lifetime.
Mhm.
I've had I'm gonna make you laugh. I'll make your audience members laugh. I'm listening to a guru. I'm not gonna say their name, but they're like, it's so easy to find peace. It's so easy, you just have to be in a place of like inner knowing. And I said to myself, easy to find peace. Well, yeah, because you're up in a mountain, you're not married, you don't got kids, you're not interacting with the neighbors. None of this is happening.
Yeah.
So I said to a few people, friends, that are inside, obviously in our like circles and stuff. And
Mhm.
I was like, damn right, I was like, but you know what? I'm getting more done than he is. I was like, he has still more to go because it's so easy to be a monk in the mountains, a guru in the mountains. I was like, I'm killing my karmas right now, and I'm getting so much done through my three children, my dog, my husband. This is my second marriage. Is like my family issues, my issues with friends, not, all these things. I'm like, I'm killing it. So then I tell my clients, I'm like, you're here with me now. I'm like, you have no idea how lucky you are that you're killing it right now. You're crashing, you're making it amazing for yourself. You're getting rid of so much karmic crap because you're
Mhm.
dealing with all this crap essentially. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
A monk in the mountains, I mean, yeah, you're not going to have an argument. Who are you going to argue with? The trees? It's
There's
not going to happen.
there's so much I could say about this. Oh my gosh, you're tempting me, but I feel so from like an Akashic perspective, we have so many lives and there's so many of us, especially that are really deeply on the spiritual path that have done that in past lives already, and it's not our purpose. And there is a divine purpose for, let's say, that monk on the mountain. That monk on the mountain may not be going through like the karmas and the learning
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that's not what they need in this life. Maybe what they need in this life is that deep connection to God or to support the energy of the location they're in or the people or the collective consciousness within that field or that region or
That's
that
absolutely
country
right. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
through them and getting enlightenment and holding that space. But it's just, they're both difficult paths, but they're in different ways because like a householder path is so hard. There's so much responsibility. There's so much emotional hardship and turmoil that we go through that people couldn't even understand unless they experienced it.
Uh, I gotta tell you something funny. So I've had many past life recalls. There's so far I recall, I think about like 9 or 10 of my past lives.
Hmm.
And none of them, I don't remember any of them with children. None of them. I don't remember any of them with children, you
Hmm.
know. And because and the reason it's funny that I end up remembering this, because I was saying, God, I said like I was like, how do I be a mom? I have two
Hmm.
sons and a daughter, a lot of they're all teenagers, a lot of challenges to go
Hmm.
with three. They're very different. Obviously, all children are very different. And I'm like, how the hell do I be a good mom? I'm like, I can't do it on my own. I'm like, I need help. Like why am I a mom in this lifetime? I'm like, seriously, like, what's the point of this? And
Hmm.
then I start to recall my lifetimes, right? I start to recall and I'm like, shit, I have no experience being a mom. I was like, I was probably telling everybody else how to be a parent. And
Right.
I was not a parent. I should have shoved my mouth, tail between my legs. But I'm telling everybody how to be a parent. And it's like it's interesting because then when you're a parent, you obviously have physical responsibility of other human beings, which like totally puts you on a different
Hmm.
mental, spiritual level and your nerves. I mean, there's just so much that you have
Yeah.
to learn and practice, and survive and forgiveness. And like you have
Mhm.
to go through all these, emotions and experiences. But the point that I was trying to make, it's funny because yes, you are in this lifetime because there's something that you're not that experienced in and you want to come to learn more. Do
Yes.
I recommend everybody being a parent? No, it's not that bad. It really isn't that bad. Even like the worst times that I even have with my children, it's not that bad. I
Mm-hmm.
understand the bigger picture. I understand the destination. But yeah, it's about getting experience. That's why, I go back and I say, don't get pissed off because you're having a really hard time. Say to yourself, like, how can I learn? How can I make this better? Open up my mind so that I could process everything, so that I could get to my destination, wherever it may be. It could be a happy place. It could be a place maybe without, someone in your life, wherever it may be. But like understand that there is a destination. You have to keep looking at that goal and keep working at it. But yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, it is the soul's desire for the experience for spiritual growth. So it can learn, so it can evolve and spiritually grow. And like what you were saying is true because I've also seen where people don't have something in their life because they've had it for so many lifetimes. So same like you had the freedom of not having kids for so many lives. So now you wanted the opposite experience. And maybe someone has had kids all of their lives and they're like, hey, I'm done.
So I'm so happy you brought that up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have clients that don't have children. Some of them want children, some of them don't. But they were like, why? They're like, they're like, but why? Why don't I have kids? And I'm telling you, 9 out of 10 times, it's because they've already played that role so many times. Because
Mm-hmm.
they come in this lifetime, they're super nurturing and they have a great nurturing personality, super patient, which obviously you have to practice, as someone who's been a parent so many lifetimes ago. And like I've had clients that remember how we talked about a curse? They're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
am I cursed? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I'm like, you've done it so many times. You finally want to have personal growth. Just focus on you.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's not bad. Problem is society, culture, community, religion tells you all these
I
things,
know.
which, they're not 100% correct. You know
I
what I
know.
mean? So going to astrologer, doing Akashic records with you, you could clear up that issue, give them the healing in the moment, and then they could, move on, being like, you know what, it's fine where I am.
You
You know,
know, it's so crazy because just yesterday I was having a little bit of a heated discussion about this topic with a monk who was basically quoting the Vedas at me, being like, no, women's main purpose is to procreate and to become pregnant and have children. And it's an unfulfilling life for them if they do not. And I was like, I have seen so many readings where that is not their purpose. And if they did that, it would be harmful to what they're really here to do for their life. And it was like, they were just like, nope, it's in the scripture, this and that. Like, and I was like, okay, you can say that. Times have changed. And I know from what I've seen in my readings, and I know from like people like you, astrologers, who can also confirm it in charts and say, hey, look at this house, it's empty. Or look at these factors. This is what's going on. And this is what really the role is of kids in your life. Like it is something that is in the chart, it's in the records, it's there. Like it's not all cut and dry according to like orthodoxy from any religion or sect or scripture or whatever. So I'm glad you brought that up.
that's 100% true. See, I
Mhm.
already knew this before I started doing astrology. Astrology was beautiful because it helped me validate that for me, which was
Mhm.
nice.
Same.
But
Yep.
that's why I said in the beginning of the interview, there's amazing astrologers, intuitive astrologers, and then there's just some that like they could give you the technical stuff, but they don't know how to really read deeper
Mhm.
into the chart. And that's where people suffer. And then, you always hear like, oh, I went to this or he told me X, and I've had it happen. I've had clients that went to super famous astrologer. I mean, these people paid, she and he, because it's been men and women that went, they paid big bucks for these astrologers, big bucks. I'm not
Mhm.
kidding.
Mhm.
And then they come to see me, and these are astrologers that I've looked up to. Some of them have taught me, and
Mhm.
I'm like, why did they do that? But then I'm like, you
Right.
know what?
Right.
Everyone is a different kind of teacher. Some people just they have the technical information, but they don't have the intuition, they don't have the spiritual elevation, they don't have the ability to really give that person not just the truth, not just what they need, but what they came to you, what they're looking for,
Yeah.
right? And
And
be
I feel that people will find the perfect person for them in their journey at the moment. So even if they're like not that skilled in whatever they're doing, any kind of reading,
Right.
that is what that person needed to hear. And maybe it's not even the right information, especially if it's like a psychic reader, medium, whatever, and they're not skilled. But maybe that's what needed to kick them into gear.
Here.
Maybe they needed that experience so they can question what was going on, so they can start trusting their own intuition. So because I used to like, when I taught yoga and stuff, and now as with what I do with readings and teaching and things like that, I used to almost get frustrated when I would hear of that. Like I'm almost like, oh, like that's not right. Like I wish people would know and have better discernment to find the right people. But then now I understand it's like that is part of their experience that had to happen. It is part of the karmic experience.
Yeah.
I mean, any meeting that you have with someone like that is karmically already destined. It's
Yes.
not an accident that you're going to meet with someone at this time on Zoom or whatever, even like brush shoulders on the street, like even down to that. So, yes, I get what you're
That's
saying.
100% accurate.
Hmm.
Yeah, none of us are new to each other.
Hmm.
We're all doing sometimes what I like to call favors or or like credits, paybacks. So I
Hmm.
know that everybody that comes to me, I'm like, they probably did something for me in the past. So I'm just paying it back, back to them. I'm helping them in their journey because they helped me in my journey. So yeah, totally. That's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
It's just the world is perfectly designed
Yes.
in that way where there's debits and credits and it's a perfectly functioning system that we
Hmm.
have here in the universe. There's no that's why I said, like, there's people that go through bad experiences. Like, somebody was, I forgot who it was, another astrologer. He was saying I was watching a video because it came up as a video on my YouTube, and he was saying something about how some people are complaining, like, why am I being abused in this marriage, or why am I going through this? And he said, because you probably beat the crap out of them in a previous lifetime,
It's possible. Yeah.
Like, for instance, my husband, I knew that he was in one of his previous lifetime, and he could even confirm it. He even confirmed it. He was a soldier, so he has like a birthmark on his body, and he goes, "This is a good symbol for my lineage. It means that I have something good." I was like, "No, man." I was like, "You have that birthmark." I was like, "Because you got burned in a battle." I was like, "That's why it's there." And then he's like, I remember earlier in the relationship, and he's like, "It's funny you say that. I had a lot of dreams that I was like." In war and in the trenches and all that stuff. Well, like, that's
Mhm.
what birthmark is, to remind you, to
Mhm.
keep having the courage to keep moving forward. And also it's in the back, so it means like have a backbone, which he
Mhm.
does. Clearly he does.
Mhm.
But that's also symbolic. It's a reminder. Like, we always take something with us from our past lives, but it's not meant to be bad. Like, a lot of the things, and I hate to even go into this topic, but a lot of things that are happening with the children, you know what I mean?
Mm.
It's sad, but it's like it's also waking us up to actually implement positive changes to get us to where we need to be. Because if we didn't know, we won't do anything. We'll just leave everything the way it is,
And
right?
they represent our inner children. I
Yep.
think if we start treating our inner children personally better and not pushing them away, blocking them, doing all those things, it'll manifest in the collective as well. But I love what you were saying about how it's divinely planned. Like, I won't go into like a full detail, but I had a session even just yesterday where I saw a 70-year karmic cycle end and play out due to a previous lifetime where they did something to someone else that lasted that person's life for almost that amount of time. And
Wow.
if you didn't know that, you would think, oh, I've had this difficulty for so long, oh my gosh, I'm just struggling. But then when they saw why and how it was just simply a balancing of the scales. But the thing is, like, as little humans, unless we take the time to perceive like the grand play that the
Mm,
divine cosmic, they call it Leela, like the play of life, that is so beyond our like even conceptual
I know.
imagination. And then we can see like, oh, okay, now I understand. Like things aren't really unfair. Like this is how it's all just playing out in the big cosmic thing. I was just thinking about this in the shower this morning. I just was thinking like, wow, imagine having the level of intelligence to design something like this so perfectly. And it's not just on Earth and our solar system. There's planetary systems of
100%.
layers and locas, and then there's different universal spheres and fields
Yours, yeah.
all going on. Like
Perfectly designed. Very complex, but perfectly designed.
wild. Well, I feel like I could talk to you for hours, and I know it's been a little bit of time. So I do want to ask, how can people find you for a reading? Because I loved it, and I know we didn't talk about this at all, but you also incorporate numerology in your reading, which I loved. And so, how can people find you and your website and work with you if they're
Oh,
interested?
I love it. Yes, they can find me on Instagram at AstroDevi333. So it's ASTRODEVI 333 on Instagram and or Facebook, or they could go to AstroDevi, ASTRODEVI.com. Of course, I have to spell it out. Sometimes it's like a tongue twister,
I'll
but
write it. Yeah, I'll
they
write
could
it in the show
also,
notes too. So don't
yeah,
worry
yeah.
about it.
But they could also search Lissabeta Collage. They'll be able to find me. I have my name everywhere. I'm going to be doing some different stuff, so people are going to have to search me by my name as well. But that's where they can find me. It's not astrology is not scary. I have to
Yeah.
tell people all the time. I've had clients that have come to like, oh my God, are you going to tell me something bad? I'm like, not really. I'm like, but if there's something that you need to be concerned about, I'm like, I'm here to give you answers, remedies, solutions. Like my
Right.
job is to problem solve, not to, tell you the doom is coming. See
Right.
ya. That's like it doesn't work that way. You know,
Yes.
and I think that and I know that I'm sure you go through this as well. People are so scared for the future. They're scared for the present. There's so much fear. The reason why you come to someone like Kat or myself is really because it's time to get rid of that layer of fear and just be
Mhm.
yourself, move on, get in touch with your authentic self and just live life like happily, authentically, the best version of yourself. You are the best version of yourself. Whatever it is that you want to become, you can do it. But, getting some of these negative layers off is definitely helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so, so, so much. I
Oh, I
loved
had so much
talking with
fun.
you. Yeah, it was fun. I was just
We
like,
gotta
oh
do
my
this
God, I
again.
would love to. I looked at the time and I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, well, I told you I cleared out my schedule just to
Yes.
make sure we have plenty of time. But yeah, I would love to do this again and we could like touch on any topics that you want. But yes, I love you dearly. I love what you're doing. I love your
Oh,
podcast.
thank you.
It's amazing. People should definitely continue to follow you and watch your podcast because you have really great guests, lots of very, very, very valuable information, that people are definitely seeking. So,
And
you
I
know.
feel you're one of them. And this was fabulous. And I hope that gave people an insight into Vedic astrology because I think a lot of people sometimes may shy away from it because culturally it's maybe not as relatable or it's newer. But I think when you go past that like lens of, okay, there's a little bit of a cultural difference, you can see how this is really like it's a blueprint of the soul and its
Yeah.
energy and its karmic energy beyond cultures, beyond
Yes.
anything like that. And you're a great representative of that. You know, you're
Oh,
Albanian doing Vedic
thank you.
astrology, right?
Yes, I know. You want to hear something funny? I think I'm the only Albanian that is a Vedic astrologer, a psychic medium, numerologist, tarot reader, and intuitive coach. I'm going to be adding some new titles, but it's actually really interesting because in my culture, like this is not very widely
Mhm.
accepted, which is interesting because Albanians are very mystical people. And that's
Mm.
also one of the reasons when I started doing this work. I didn't go on social media for so many years because I didn't want my family to know that I was doing this because I was afraid of like the judgment.
The witch
They're
hunt.
yeah, they'll look at you like, you're a witch or,
Yeah.
witchy and
Mhm.
stuff like that. They don't
Yeah.
understand that there's a scientific part to this. It's not just intuition and, spiritual work.
Mhm.
But yeah, but it's funny because so many Albanians follow me and they like my work. I have so many Albanian clients. I have some of them where their spouses don't know and it's like I'll go to my Albanian church and I won't say hello to anybody. I let for them to say hello to me because I don't want to blow up nobody's spot.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh my God, that's
You
so
know?
funny.
Isn't that funny?
That's
So,
really funny,
yeah,
actually.
yeah, yeah. It is,
Oh.
it is funny. So that's why I always tell them, if you see me, say hello. I won't say anything because I don't want to blow up your spot because they're gonna be like, well, how do they know her? Did they do a reading? Which you know what? A few of my clients, I love them. I love them with all my heart. A few of them, they saw me at church, they're like, hey, remember me? You did the reading for me. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I love you for, just saying that, because
Mhm.
Catholics, don't
Mhm.
get astrology reading is bad. Meanwhile, before the 1500s, popes and, they had astrologers doing readings and stuff. So it's really interesting to see.
Yeah, where do you think all those texts are stored? They're in the Vatican.
Yeah, they definitely are,
So,
but
yeah. Well, we
it's
are
funny.
transcending borders and cultures and
Yes,
countries. So,
and it's beautiful and I love it. And I'm just glad that there's people like us doing it because
yeah,
everybody's ready for it now. They're ready. They're more than ready for it now.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much again. And
Aw.
I can't wait for everyone to hear this. And it was awesome talking to you. So thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. I hope that you enjoyed the conversation. I could have talked to her for another 2, 3 hours, but I saw the time. And so I made sure we were kind of in the time range of the podcast here. So I hope that you enjoyed the episode and that you got a lot out of it around your personal journey and just understanding Vedic astrology in a way. And so, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the Soul Awakening podcast. When you subscribe, you'll be notified of our new interviews and episodes that release every Friday. You can find all the episodes online on my website at catfowler.com. On Spotify, you can now watch or listen to the episodes. On Apple Podcasts, you can listen to them. And then on my YouTube channel, which I just started, so that you can watch the interviews there on YouTube. And that's at cat_Fowler on YouTube, as well as pretty much all places where podcasts are found. And please don't forget to leave a review while you're there, whether it's on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you're listening. Also, there is a gift for all of you that got this far. You can get 10% off your first Akashic Records reading with me by using the code SOULPOD, SOULPOD, at checkout. So, again, it's only a one-time code and it's for your first reading. So, if you're interested in doing a reading with me, you can use that code for being here and being a listener to the show. So if you love the information that you heard today and it sparked something in you, feel free to share this with your friends and your family as well. I'm your host, Kat Fowler. Thank you again for listening. And I'm wishing you lots of healing, revelations, and miracles this week. And I will see you on the next episode.